What's up, guys? We just got a break in the weather as far as good weather to spray the car. So in a last minute decision, I'm gonna just do a marathon today and try to get this thing ready to spray. And I want to get the back half of the car sprayed so I can put the interior that I'm working on back in the car. We're gonna spray it in this pop-up tent, and I'm just gonna bust my butt today, and if I can get there, I can get there, and if I don't feel comfortable with it, then we're gonna hold off. We might be able to do it tomorrow morning. Fortunately, mostly everything has been sanded, so it's just gonna be a matter of going over. Nala, hey, Nala, come here. You be nice. So it's just gonna be a matter of going over all the nooks and crannies and making sure everything is good for epoxy primer. So let's do it. So what I'm gonna do now, because I chose to start working on the interior last week, is I need to pull the car forward to give myself some more room to work, move some stuff around. We're gonna go over, make sure the car is tidied up. Still trying to decide if I'm gonna put the filler in now or just spray it and do that later. I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna pull the car forward. That should be exciting, right? All right, so I just poured some gas down the vent tube, so we shouldn't have any problem getting this thing started. I can't even tell you the last time I moved that car. Anyway, that's good, because now I know I can definitely for sure pull it around to get it into the spray booth. Alright guys, the car isn't too far off from spraying an epoxy primer. I want to take a little time and show you just what the preparation for this looks like, because if a lot of you guys are like me, you've never sprayed epoxy primer, you're wondering how perfect everything has to be. You're getting all kinds of mixed signals on the internet. I'm going to get it to as best as I want to get it, and I'm going to spray it, and I'll learn for myself what works and what doesn't work. So the entire car had the original paint on it, so I sanded as much of the first layer off as I could or wanted to with 80 grit to give the epoxy primer a good base to stick to. I'm not removing all the paint. It just doesn't, the epoxy primer I have also acts as a sealer. It's actually, technically epoxy primer is a sealer. So from everything I've read, there's no need to remove all of the paint if you don't have rust creeping in underneath everything. I hit all the areas that there were rust on the roof, made sure they went down to bare metal, and feathered everything out, like here. Yeah, that's good. Areas like this, the side of the cow, where it's tough to get into a lot of the nooks and crannies, I hit everything with I use this guy right here to get into a lot of these areas to make sure all the loose rust was removed as best I could. I'm not even going to treat this stuff. I'm going to make sure everything is very well degreased and roughed up, and I'm going to spray it. This area obviously isn't going to see the light of day, so here's what you're looking at. Some of this repair work I'm not doing right now. Maybe I'll do it later, but right now I want to get the entire car again in epoxy primer. I will hit this right here. I'll hit this with a wire brush, and if there's that much surface rust, then I will treat this, but little areas where it's spread out, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm going to spray the primer and see how it reacts over the years, see how well it sticks. So you're getting a good look at it. Now, one thing I find interesting about this car is a lot of this stuff has been stripped to bare metal for quite a while and hasn't rusted. These rocker panels were one of the last things that I stripped, and they've already started to rust, so I am going to get the wire brush on the angle grinder and re-hit this stuff, because obviously this area takes a lot of abuse, and I do want to make sure that is good to go and has a good solid foundation for the epoxy primer to sit on. The passenger or the driver door is currently off, but that was repainted for this car, so I made sure I stripped that down to the original coat of paint to have a good foundation for the epoxy primer. So we should be good there. But again, I still need to do this side. Areas like this where there was really bad pitting, I did treat this. As you can see, it's been treated. I'm gonna do the same thing with that belt tool. Get in here, get all this scraped down, roughed up as best I can, degrease everything really well to give the epoxy something good to stick to. But pretty much what you see is what I'm doing. This is my first car that I'm spraying in epoxy, and like I said, it's 6 one, half dozen the other on the internet, so I'm going to do it and find out for myself how well this stuff sticks and how well it holds up. Alright, we got the tent set up out back. We're going to pull the Mustang around, get her in for final scuffing and whatever, clean up, masking, degreasing, whatever. Gonna give her a go. She's in. What I'm gonna do is all my final prep work, get it close. I mean, it is pretty close. I'll probably back it out, lay down some tarps, pull it back in, and then start spraying. But this size tent is perfect. There is plenty of room for me to do this. Yeah, should be good to go. I'm not going to bore you guys with the prep work. I'm just going to get everything prepped, and then I'll be back whenever it's about time to spray. Alright guys, so it's the next day. Yesterday was an absolute rush, and what I can tell you I've learned already from anytime you go to spray, with the few days that I've tried to spray and then the day that I did spray, is Murphy's Law is absolutely in full effect. So anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible time. So be totally prepared for that. A lot of issues I ran into, a lot of stuff I wanted to film, but I just couldn't because I was racing against the clock to get this thing sprayed. I did get one angle of spraying it, but it wasn't worth much. But I am going to show you how this job turned out. This is one coat. I am going to put a second coat on here shortly, so hopefully I can show more of that. The spray gun worked pretty well. It had big pressure drop off, was the biggest problem. But I kind of got the hang of it and figured it out as I was going. So you can see there are areas that I just didn't get enough spray down. There's some markings on the roof. Kind of expected maybe something like this with not. Actually, as I'm looking at it, there's a lot more fish eyes than I realized. And again, I couldn't really see this that well when I was doing it. The main areas though that I found that are an issue, for the most part it looks pretty good, but there are a few areas, and these weren't areas that I expected there to be problems. Like right in here, whoops, right in here I didn't get enough spray on, and then that rusted overnight because I had to let this sit out. So there was an issue, and then right in here was a pretty big issue. A lot of what I'm assuming was this was just fish eyes or something that then rusted when the morning dew set on everything. So right here, and this is just runs from, again, the morning dew. So what I think I'm going to do before I put my second coat on is scuff these areas and then degrease them really good. Areas like this, I'm going to do the same thing. I might strip it. I don't know. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So bottom line was, it was tough to see and I did not get enough epoxy down, and I'm kind of paying the price for it. So I got plenty more time today, so I can treat all these areas the way I need to and then get a good strong second coat down, and hopefully we'll be okay. As far as how this spray booth setup worked, it was awesome. Plenty of ventilation. I never smelled fumes or anything. I had a respirator on, but as I sprayed, everything just went out, and wasn't a big problem. But that's the only problem with doing it outside is you're up against the clock, where if you have a controlled environment and you can spray anytime you want, it's way less stress. So I need to think about what I'm going to do going forward. But overall, for my first time doing it, yeah, I'm happy with it. So what I'm going to do now is start taking care of some of these spots and get another coat of this stuff down. Another thing real quick I wanted to show you guys, because I got into a pinch mixing my epoxy primer. What I ended up having to do in a last ditch effort, because it wasn't mixing right, was mix everything that I had, which I only had enough time to spray one coat. So what I did was I poured the remaining epoxy in the smallest containers that I had that it would fit in to seal off the air. Then I stuck them in plastic bags and put them in a cooler on ice. Fortunately, I had the help. I was able to call Harvey Redmond, aka Rally Cat Garage, and he helped me through some of this, because like I said, I was really in a bind. I've never done this stuff before, and yeah, he was a huge help. So hopefully this is all still very liquidy and good. All I need to do is mix this stuff up and it should be okay. So I'm gonna let this sit out and start to warm, and I'll probably only get a few days out of it like this, but that's better than what I have. All right, so since I had to mix all the epoxy primer, this is about as shade tree as you can get. I'm gonna lay out the hood, the doors, degrease everything because everything's already prepped, mask it off, and I'm gonna spray this stuff while I have the epoxy mixed up. So we'll see how it turns out. Honestly, from the stress of yesterday and just everything that took place, I'm beyond the point of caring. This stuff is scuffed. As long as I degrease it, it should be okay. So yeah, just doing what I can. Hopefully it turns out all right. Alright, it's now several days later, and I got stuff everywhere. I got teddy bears laying around. This garage is an absolute mess. I know this video is all over the place because I have so many projects going on with the interior and everything. But anyway, several days later, I wanted to show you how the second coat turned out. I already did kind of covered this in a previous video, but I'll show you a few things. First, let me tell you, for all the people that were asking, I sprayed it with this Cobalt air compressor. This is the Quiet Tech one, and it puts out 4.5 CFM at 90 PSI. What I ended up doing was, in the original video I did for this, I had a low pressure, low volume spray gun that I ended up not using because it leaked. So I just went to Harbor Freight, and the gun's laying over there somewhere. It was a Harbor Freight HV LP gun that required 6 CFM at 40 PSI. This compressor held up just fine, spraying it like that. One thing I did have to do with this compressor, you can see that the pressure is set at about 65 PSI. That's because when you pull the trigger, the thing immediately drops down to about 30. So you gotta be a little careful there. Once you figure out that technique, you're golden. I usually would start kind of off to the side and pull it and then bring the gun in. Not exactly conventional, I guess, but that's what I did. It worked fine, I got it figured out. So for anybody that's wondering, this Quiet Tech compressor, I suppose I probably should do a separate video just for the people that were interested in the spray gun setup. I will try to do that just so you can see those specifics. As far as how the car turned out, and I already kind of covered this in the previous update video, but I'm pretty darn happy with it. The only things that I'm really upset about, and I knew this was going to happen, but I had to move the panels in before it rained, was like where I grabbed the panels. You can see the epoxy kind of gets smashed and smoothed down, so I have a handprint there and there. Tried to scuff this one up a little bit. It's epoxy primer, so it's going to be really hard to keep clean, I guess. But let me show you this area where I had the fish eyes that popped up, and I sanded them down, just scuffed it so that the rust was gone, and then degreased it twice, and the epoxy went over this just fine. Turned out really good. Not sure if that compromised the foundation here, but I'll know in a few years if it starts to rust. But pretty much everything turned out really good. Scuffed up my primer pretty good here when I was putting on the fender, so I'm gonna have to touch that up, but those are just, you know, battle scars, I guess. I mean, this is it. I don't really know what else to say. It was really stressful until right up when I started pulling the trigger, and then once I got the hang of it, it was just all the stress melted away, and yeah, it was pretty straightforward from there. I had every intention of trying to film the process in more detail, but just with the fact that I was doing it outside and I only had so much daylight to do everything and the other problems that I ran into, basically I was able to film it spraying from one angle, and it just wasn't, the video wasn't what I wanted it to be, but hopefully you guys appreciate it. So yeah, this is the way everything turned out. The fenders still need to be sprayed in epoxy, and then obviously the balances and stuff like that, all the small stuff, I'll probably do that in the garage just so I can do it whenever. But don't know how long it's going to take for this to cure and harden. Looking forward to that. But the next video is probably going to be finishing up the interior. I have everything I need to do to wrap that up. I'll be seam sealing the floor, putting down kill mat, installing the carpet. Everything's going back in. I'm not quite finished with the seats. There's one more thing I think I want to do with these that I'm going to try. Don't know if I'm going to like it, but I'm going to try it. We'll see. But yeah, things are really coming together. So reassembly is not too far down the road. So we'll get there. But I appreciate all you guys watching. You're awesome. Until the next episode, stay driven.